Hey everyone, and welcome to today's explainer. Now, if you have focused on understanding the really deep structural roots of our modern environmental crisis, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we are exploring a completely fascinating synthesis. We are going to map the ideas of a 17th century philosopher directly on a modern sustainable development. And together, we're going to completely rethink how we view ownership, consumption, and the very concept of waste itself. So I want you to consider this. What if the father of private property was actually the first champion of radical sustainability? I know, it sounds totally counterintuitive, right? I mean, we naturally assume that ownership gives us the absolute right to do whatever we want with our stuff, and that includes throwing it away or just letting it go to waste. But as we'll discover today, the very philosophical foundation of property rights actually argues the exact opposite. All right, let's take a quick look at our roadmap. First, we'll look at the boundary of ownership. Then, money is the loophole. Third, the modern culture of waste. And finally, recovering original conditions. Okay, part one, the boundary of ownership. To really understand this boundary, we have to travel back to the 17th century and look at John Locke's famous labor theory of appropriation. You might actually know the basics of this one. The idea is that by mixing your labor with something in the natural commons, say picking a wild apple from a tree, you make it your private property. But here is the catch, and it's a big one. Locke placed massive, strict conditions on that ownership. He explicitly stated that nothing was made by God for man to spoil or destroy. So for Locke, waste doesn't just look bad, it actively dissolves the moral basis of your ownership claim. Literally, the moment that apple rots in your pocket, it ceases to be yours. See, Locke designed a self-limiting property regime built on three really rigid constraints. First up is the spoilage condition. You can only take what you can use before it perishes. Second is the sufficiency proviso. You can only take from the commons if there is enough and as good left over for everybody else. And third, the duty of charity. Your surplus actually belongs to those who have no means of survival. Just think about how radical that is compared to the way we operate today. Together, these rules mean ownership isn't absolute at all. It is strictly a time-limited right to use. And that's a stark contrast to how we think about things now. Today, we tend to view property as a static title. Once you buy something, it's yours forever, even if it just sits there gathering dust in your closet for decades. But Locke's framework is entirely conditioned on use. In his eyes, letting goods rot or sit unused isn't just inefficient, it's essentially an act of theft from the community, because you removed it from the shared commons without actually using it. Moving right along to part two, money as the loophole. So if Locke's rules were really that strict, how in the world did we get from his anti-waste ethic to the hyper-consumerism we see today? Well, we have to introduce the villain of our story. And what's absolutely fascinating is how the invention of durable coins created an internal loophole in Locke's own argument. Locke realized that if you traded your perishable apples for shiny metal or gems, you weren't technically violating the spoilage condition. Why? Because metal doesn't rot. This brilliantly illustrates the massive shift that occurred. Before money, the economy was physically capped by decay. You only took what you needed for subsistence because anything extra would just rot anyway. There was literally no reason to quarrel or hoard. But after money, boom, durable accumulation is unlocked. Inequality enters the picture. Suddenly, humans have this tool that allows for growing, endless acquisitiveness with absolutely no natural ceiling. Think about how profoundly that changes human behavior. You know, even Locke himself seemed kinda uneasy about this. Notice his deflating, almost ambivalent language here, calling money just shells or a sparkling pebble. He definitely recognized that the introduction of money was the exact moment his natural anti-waste logic basically stopped applying. He essentially handed humanity the technical means to completely circumvent the very rules he had just established. Which brings us to part three, modern culture of waste. Let's fast forward a few centuries and look at the work of modern scholar G. Munir, who diagnosed today's consumer insatiability. The really crucial point here is how modern issues map perfectly onto Locke's 17th century framework. Munir points out that today we buy superfluous goods just to discard them. That is exactly Locke's spoilage condition being violated. It's just durable goods sitting unused instead of rotting apples. And when Munir notes that 90% of raw materials never even reach a product's final stages, that violates Locke's sufficiency proviso. We are basically drawing from the common stock way faster than we are productively using it. So here is the core synthesis of this entire explainer. Our modern waste culture, fast fashion, planned obsolescence, single-use plastics, none of this is a departure from the origins of private property. It's actually the direct consequence of the one feature of that theory that Locke allowed to override all the others, the durability of money. The culture of waste we live in is exactly what Locke tried to prevent but couldn't.
Finally, let's head into part 4, recovering original conditions.
So if money broke the system, how do we actually fix it? Well, think about the formula. Sustainability equals spoilage plus sufficiency. When we look at modern sustainability hierarchies, reduce, reuse, recover, recycle, we very often treat these as new, radical limitations on the free market. But structurally, they are identical to Locke's original hierarchy of obligations. Prevention at the source is exactly what Locke meant when he said, don't take more than you can actually use. This completely changes how we view modern environmental policies. Take extended producer responsibility, or EPR schemes, which force manufacturers to take back their electronic waste. This isn't just government overreach, it's basically an artificial software patch designed to reimpose Locke's spoilage rules on goods that no longer naturally decay. And the whole idea of intergenerational equity, making sure we leave enough for the future, is just Locke's enough and as good sufficiency proviso extended across time. This also reveals why purely market-based fixes like carbon pricing can be kind of limited. Wealthy appropriators can just absorb the cost and keep wasting, reproducing the exact same asymmetry that money created in the first place.
This is a massive, massive paradigm shift. Sustainability advocates are not attacking the foundations of private property rights. They are actually demanding that we enforce the original internal rules of those rights. Sustainability isn't an imposition. It is a recovery of conditions that were there from the very beginning.
I want to leave you with a really provocative thought to chew on. If durable, non-rotting money was the exact mechanism that broke Locke's anti-waste constraints all those years ago, what does that mean for modern digital assets like cryptocurrency? Are they the ultimate expression of this loophole, completely divorced from physical reality and natural limits? It begs the ultimate question: why did we ever allow the original moral warrant for property to lapse in the first place? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning the foundations, and I'll catch you next time.